welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jen Carter. My pronouns are she, her, and I lead tech and volunteering for Google.org, which is Google's philanthropy. I am so excited to be here today with the Trevor Project, an org that is near and dear to my heart and that I've had the great privilege of working closely with over the past couple of years. For those who are not familiar, the Trevor Project is the world's largest suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization for LGBTQ plus young people. Estimates suggest that more than 1.8 million LGBTQ plus youth between the ages of 13 and 24 in the United States seriously consider suicide each year. And so the Trevor Project was founded in 1998 as the first 24/7 national hotline for LGBTQ plus youth in crisis. And they have since grown to serve over 200,000 young people each year through phone and chat and text. We at Google believe really deeply in the work that they are doing. And so over the past 2 years alone, Google.org and Googlers have donated over $3 million to advance Trevor's mission. And we've also provided 2 cohorts of Google.org fellows, which means that we've sent over 20 Googlers who worked full-time pro bono with the Trevor Project for 6 months each to help accelerate their impact. So we are proud supporters of the Trevor Project, and I am extremely excited to welcome Shira and John to the stage for this fireside chat. We're going to talk for about 30 or 40 minutes and then start taking audience questions. And so throughout our conversation, please feel free to ask your questions directly into the YouTube chat. And you'll also notice a blue donate button on the page. So if you feel so inspired to make a donation to support the Trevor Project's truly life-saving work, we certainly encourage you to do so. All right. Hi, Shira. Hi, John.
Hi, Jen.
How are you? Why don't we start by just getting to know you both a little bit better? So maybe Shira, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at the Trevor Project, and maybe a little bit more about the organization for folks who aren't as familiar?
Absolutely. First of all, Jen, it's so wonderful to share this virtual stage with you today, and John, of course. My name is Shira Kogan. Pronouns are she and her. I'm the Director of Corporate Partnerships at the Trevor Project. So that means that I have the absolute pleasure of getting to work with our corporate partners on all sorts of types of partnerships where we are both helping companies accomplish their goals, whether those are around social impact, diversity, equity, and inclusion, employee engagement, cause marketing, and while also empowering companies to contribute to our mission, which, as Jen said so well, is to end suicide for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning young people. So a little bit more about the organization. I think Jen shared some wonderful information, but just to add a little bit of color, you can really think of Trevor's programs in 2 main buckets. The first is that we are providing free, confidential crisis counseling to LGBTQ young people whenever, wherever they need it across the country. And we are available 24/7, free and confidential. So if young people are ever in crisis, if they're experiencing suicidal ideation, if they're just having a tough day and they need someone to talk to, they can reach out to Trevor. But we also have another bucket of programs which are really about preventing LGBTQ youth from ever entering a crisis in the first place through building a better world for these young people. So that's a lot of where our corporate partners come in as well, is how are we together across sectors really creating a world where LGBTQ youth feel safe, they feel like they are accepted for exactly who they are, and they are empowered to, as their true authentic selves, kind of make their way in this world and do all the amazing, wonderful things we know that they're destined to do. So again, so happy to be here with you all today, and I'll pass it over to John.
Thanks, Shira. And again, thanks so much for having us today. This is really exciting. My name is John Callery. I use he, him pronouns. I'm from San Diego, California, and I am the Vice President of Technology at the Trevor Project. So in my role, I oversee product development, user experience, AI and engineering, and technology operations. And I have been with the organization for over 4 years now.
Amazing. So excited to have you both here again, and always amazed by all of the incredible work that the Trevor Project is doing. Shira, I'll start with you. In your role as Director of Corporate Partnerships, you've no doubt overseen a large number of these types of partnerships. So I'd love to just start with your overall reflections on the collaboration with Google.org.
Yeah, absolutely. So I could probably answer this question for the next hour, so I'll try to keep it short. But our partnership with Google has been so unique, and I think that it's really because it is a partnership in which we've worked together in so many different areas. So it's really been a truly holistic partnership. And as a result, I think that so many people who have worked with the other organization would say that we truly are one team in a way that's pretty unique. So to give you some different ideas of kind of what those different elements have been, the first is that in 2019, we did enter the AI for Social Impact Challenge for Google.org. So we submitted an application about how we wanted to use machine learning and AI to advance our mission to serve more LGBTQ youth in crisis. And we were selected as one of, I think it was 20 winners out of 2,600 applications, if I'm remembering correctly. Okay, I see the nod from Jen, I've got it. And we're able to actually move forward. And I know John will talk a lot more about that specific project, but it was around assessing risk for LGBTQ youth to make sure we're getting back to LGBTQ young people who are reaching out to us as quickly as possible if they're at the highest risk of suicide. But then in 2020, Google and Trevor had such an amazing relationship. We'd already been working together for a while on that project, and Google made a reinvestment of additional funds to support Trevor's programming, both to help support TrevorSpace, which we could talk about more, but is our safe space social networking site that's global for LGBTQ youth to build a community of peer support. That program falls within kind of our prevention umbrella of programming, and also to help us to implement AI into training our volunteer crisis counselors in a more scalable and with an even higher quality of training. So we can talk more about that, but there was a significant financial investment made here. But not only that, as Jen said, there were so many Google employees, I think there were 26 who either worked full-time with Trevor for 6 months or worked through the 20% program. And those folks were people who were literally on Trevor's team for 6 months and helping us actually build out this technology with a lot of skill sets that honestly, at least at that time, our team did not have, and a lot of expertise they were able to bring to us. But not only that, but we've also done external messaging and marketing together. So not only helping us build these programs, but also helping ensure that more LGBTQ youth globally know that the Trevor Project is here as a resource for them. So for example, we planned a campaign to let young people know about TrevorSpace together for Pride season of 2020. Campaign did kind of shift a bit just based on what was going on in the world right then, such as kind of in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd and the protests for racial justice around the country, but still being able to send out that message that both Google and the Trevor Project are here to support LGBTQ young people, and really having that authenticity to say, we've already been doing this work together. Why don't you join us to our communities? And of course, Google reaches so many young people and potential allies of these young people, current and potential allies, and lets them know that the Trevor Project is here for them. So many people that we wouldn't necessarily be able to reach otherwise. So I think that's the high level, but of course, happy to go into details about any element of this very holistic partnership.
Yeah, I mean, it really was such a holistic collaboration, as you just shared. And internally as well, we worked cross-functionally with a variety of folks like our Pride-at and our Trans-at employee resource groups to ensure that we could support you all in whatever way was needed, like recruiting the crisis counselor volunteers. But I do want to come back to the tech projects that you mentioned, since that was certainly a focus. And as a nonprofit, it can be really scary to devote significant resources to those types of projects. And I know that didn't happen overnight. So John, as the very first technologist that the org ever hired, can you maybe share a little bit more about that history of technology at the Trevor Project and how it's really evolved over time?
Sure thing. So our capabilities and vision were like very different before our relationship with Google.org. Like you said, I was the first hire in technology in the organization's 18-year history. And so just think about that for a minute. Forget about product, forget about user experience. When I started on my first day, my computer literally had like a piece of tape holding the side panel on top of it. So my first year at Trevor was really focused on like the basics. Like we needed to get new computers for people, upgrade networking equipment, implement identity management software and productivity software. And once we had some stability there, we were able to pivot our focus over to our crisis services. So at the time, we only had a couple hundred volunteers. And we also had that research showing that there were at least 1.8 million LGBTQ youth who seriously consider suicide every year in the US alone. And so there was a huge gap in our capabilities and ability to both scale and improve quality of care. So with quality and scale in mind, we began building a new platform for our counselors. And this was something that we could fully customize, but even then we were running into limitations. And before we actually had like a formal relationship with the .org team, we were actually even starting to reach out to other areas of Google saying like, hey, we have these issues, like, can you think of some creative ways that we might be able to solve this? And coincidentally, around the same time, the AI Impact Challenge came out from Google.org, and there was a problem that we were trying to solve using traditional means that was just failing. And we thought that this problem might be uniquely solved through AI, and we applied. And I think something that was really great was throughout the Impact Challenge, there were a lot of skills that we gained that were unrelated to technology, such as goal setting and OKRs, in addition to technical skills like model development. And and it was sort of at the beginning of the AI Impact Challenge that we had conversations with you and other people in .org about this idea of doing a fellowship. And I remember you asked me, what kind of talent would you want? And I think we were like, a couple software engineers and machine learning engineers. And I think you were like, I think like in addition to building an ML model, you also have to weave this into the user experience for young people. So this was just a catalyst for a ton of learning. How do we center the organization around a product development mentality? What kinds of teams and skill sets do you need to build highly impactful products and services? And that's changed the way we think about things today. Today we wouldn't dream of building a new service for young people without first conducting foundational user experience research, or we wouldn't imagine deploying a new feature without first doing usability testing. And I'm really excited to share that, like, as of today, we have full-time on-staff product managers, UX researchers, a UX designer, software engineers, and ML engineers. And so we're at this place in our evolution where we can actually build pretty much whatever we can think of because we have the right team composition. And so there's a lot of additional exciting stuff that we'll be working on in the future, but it's really been a game changer for us.
Yeah, I remember that conversation very well, and it's so great to hear about sort of that evolution over the past 20 plus years at this point since the start, but certainly the past couple, even seeing the changes over that time since we started to work together. But just to dive into the actual work, I think, John, can you maybe share a little bit more about the specific projects that we started to work on together at that time? I think especially the risk assessment tool and the crisis contact simulator.
Sure. So, I talked a minute ago about this first problem that we were trying to solve with AI. And there are a lot of young people that reach out to us. And young people come to us with, varying risk levels, varying presenting issues. And so they could be coming to us looking for coming out resources, or they may be, close or in progress with a suicide attempt. And so we wanted to find a way to connect youth at highest risk of suicide with our trained crisis counselors as quickly as possible. And so before any chat or text conversation, we ask a couple of questions through the form, sort of like an intake form. And our goal was to see if we could use the responses to determine their risk level. And depending on their risk level, if they're higher risk, connect them with the next available counselor. So kind of prioritizing them in our queue. And no matter how we sliced it, pre-machine learning, there was nothing that we could build that didn't result in a lot of false positives, which really just defeats the whole purpose of having kind of like a bifurcation process. And even with the grant funding from the AI Impact Challenge, I think you all and our coaches knew that this was going to be a really tough problem and would need resources. So we started the first fellowship with 12, I believe, fellows in product, UX, software engineering, and machine learning. And even halfway through that fellowship, we didn't have a working model, which for me was like terrifying. And it wasn't until we even started kind of going beyond classic classification models and really looking at like NLP where we found success. And we ended up using Google's Albert model. And that's been really successful and has helped us prioritize thousands of youth over the past now year. I think that model has been functioning. So, at the same time, we also knew that the only way to meet the growing demand of youth reaching out was to grow our counselor base from what I said was hundreds to thousands. And we have a very robust training program at Trevor. And throughout that couple-month training, our trainees conduct 4 or so of these role play conversations before they're able to take a real chat with a young person. And the way we do this is they actually talk to our training coordinators who act as a young person in crisis. And each of these 4 role plays features a different persona. And a persona is a fictitious young person with a different name, presenting issues and risk level. And it takes about an hour and a half of staff time to both plan and host these role plays. So we figured if we could come up with some kind of a simulator for trainees to talk to, we could really increase the throughput of the training program and thus bring on a lot more digital crisis counselors, which is super important. So towards the end of our first fellowship, a couple of fellows and Wilson Lee, our machine learning engineer here at Trevor, began experimenting using these NLP models, but from a generative perspective. So seeing if we could actually create a conversation. And the way we did this was we actually inadvertently had captured several thousand of these conversations between our training coordinators and our trainees, and we used that as an input to generate a conversation. And so by the end of that first fellowship, we had a strong proof of concept. And it wasn't long before we were knocking on your door again saying, hey, if we could do another fellowship, we think we can do this. And as of today, we launched in January. I think we've trained over 700 volunteers on our first persona, Riley, in July. And I would imagine that it's far over 1,000 as of today. So again, really, really exciting. And it's just been a game changer for us.
It's amazing. And I think really important to highlight too what you shared, that there sort of is some inherent risk to doing this type of work. We didn't know if it would work. And frankly, with the crisis contact simulator, it wasn't even possible to do even just a few years ago. So definitely some risk there that we took on sort of together, and has been incredible to see the results and, the truly life-saving work, and just cool to see this transformation from, an org that when it was just starting out was certainly using technology, but not necessarily fully integrating it into its work, to one that is really serving as a model for other nonprofits around how you can make these strategic investments in technology that not only save time and costs, but can actually improve the quality of care, which I think we saw with the persona. But again, I could go into these specific projects in great detail, but just in the interest of time, I'm curious, Shira, outside the contributions to the individual projects, I've heard you both touch on it a little bit, but could you share more maybe about any impact the collaboration has had on the broader organization?
Yes, absolutely. So this is the thing that is really special about how Google.org approached this partnership, and I know with other nonprofits that were part of the Impact Challenge as well, is Google was really focused, and it was very clear to our team from the beginning, on giving us good frameworks and giving us good guidance and coaching, but then letting us fill in the framework. So to use a sort of cheesy analogy, Google was giving us the coloring book, and then we were able to color in with our specific work and impact and expertise. And coming to the table, Google has a lot to offer in terms of the structures and the technology, both the technology, but also the technological expertise, and kind of how you run your organization. That is really exemplary for a lot of nonprofits to learn from. And then, of course, we're coming to the table with our expertise on mental health and the LGBTQ community, and the fact that we're providing these programs directly to the community. So we learned a lot from Google throughout this process, not only what John was talking about, like, hey, maybe you need these other roles at your organization to implement technology as effectively as possible, but also, implementing OKRs on an org-wide level, which we literally now do every year at the Trevor Project. John also touched on the fact that he was literally the first tech person at Trevor. And now we have a tech team of, I know it's over 20, but John, am I even outdated? I don't remember the last number, but it's a lot more people now.
Close to 30, yeah.
Yeah, it's close to 30. So we now understand, the many steps that need to happen leading up to a technology project, including, and I really want to highlight the fact that we learned a lot about how to think about bias within AI models from the Google team. And really, we've learned a lot about how do you apply an intersectional lens to ensure that what we're doing isn't actually inadvertently having bias baked into it in terms of how we're treating LGBTQ youth. So those were conversations that were always front and center. Like, I remember it being a literal question on the application for the AI Impact Challenge, like, are you thinking about bias within AI, and how are you thinking about fairness? So those are all things that we've learned. And I would say that when we first submitted our application, we were an organization that we were innovative in many ways, and we had made a lot of progress for our technology. And I'd credit John with so much of that. But I'm not sure that we were an organization that, like, the MIT Technology Review would be writing about, or that people would be like, what is a nonprofit that if there was something technologically that they wanted to do, that they would have the resources and expertise to do. And flash forward to 2021, we really are. I mean, we have been recognized by many publications as an organization that is really innovative in the technology space. But what that really translates to is that we're able to make a stronger impact for the youth that we serve. Ultimately, one, I mean, press helps us get out in front of potential new people who want to get involved in the organization, from supporters of the organization, potential funders and other partners, young people themselves, but also the fact that now we understand we need a UX person on our team. That means that young people reaching out to us are having a better user experience because we know that, and we know that that's something we should be doing. So I think that the way that we think about things is just very different now than it was when we first started working with Google. And it's really empowered us to become kind of the organization, and we still have so much room to grow, don't get me wrong, but to move towards being an organization that is the organization we've always wanted to be, if that makes sense, and really be well positioned to be innovative. The one other thing that I'll highlight here is that we also, it's very important to us, and I know it's very important to the Google team, that we are communicating to other nonprofits that they can do these things too. So we want to take what we've learned and share it with our peer organizations. There are so many different types of organizations who, would be able to learn from how to apply UX to your social impact work, how to apply an intersectional lens to whatever you're doing. And we've actually published different articles giving folks actual, tangible best practices that Trevor's learned. We have a whole section of our website now on innovation at the Trevor Project, where people can come and kind of learn from our case study. And we want to continue to do that. And we've had many consultations, actually, or John and the tech team have, with other nonprofits, really being able to pave the way. And I would say, be able to ensure that nonprofits know it's okay to take risks sometimes, and also acknowledging that you also need funders and partners who are willing to take those risks with you. And I think that that's something we've really valued about Google. But I think together we're also sending a message to the space that, hey, we can go further together and do more together, but nonprofits do have to have that ability and that opportunity to take a risk and invest in technology and see where it brings us. And so I think that that's something that Google also said from the beginning. This may not work as we picture it, and that you are willing to walk that path with us and figure out, okay, well, what will work to accomplish our shared goals?
Yeah, amazing. I couldn't agree more with so many of the things that you just shared. But one thing I'll just highlight is it was really clear from the start the sort of multidisciplinary nature of the work and of the team. And Trevor has always had a really diverse staff from a skill set perspective, like folks with PhDs in clinical psychology and medical doctors with expertise in youth psychiatry. And so I think just an incredible team at Trevor that was really well positioned to do this work. But then also now over the past few years has also grown the tech side of that, because it really does require all of these skill sets coming together. So the engineers and the product folks and the UXers and really everyone coming together. It's the work is just extremely multidisciplinary in nature. So I think this all takes us up maybe to around March, when Riley, that first crisis contact simulator persona, was launched. But John, what has your team been working on since then?
So following the successful rollout of Riley, we quickly got working on the next persona. And this is a young person with named Drew. And Drew, again, has different presenting issues and a different risk level. And I'm excited to say that our first cohort of volunteers will be training on both Riley and Drew in September, which is just really exciting for all of us here at Trevor. When we developed the crisis contact simulator, it was always the intention that we would build a model that we could iterate on and apply for future training role play scenarios. And I think that that's something that was a really unique outcome of our work with Google.org. And we feel like the partnership set us up to continue to innovate with our own technology team long after Googlers left the organization. And beyond the crisis context simulator, we're also starting to think of a lot of other really important and impactful areas that we can innovate in technology. So there's a lot to stay apprised of in the months ahead.
Yeah, Shira, how about on your side?
So just to add a little bit onto what John was saying, I think that we have been, through our partnership, able to build kind of a sustainable model for how to engage in technology work. And that is absolutely something that we have been doing with different tech companies, that now when companies come to us and say, hey, what's the best way to work together? We're like, we have it for you. We have a great case study of how you can put together technology, expertise, and kind of that people power, as well as funding to make a really big impact. So we've really been able to kind of replicate that and build that into how we work with our corporate partners. But in addition, our technology team, as John said, really has been able to build that sustainable group that Google.org has helped us learn a lot, but has also kind of taught us how to fish. So we're able to pursue additional projects moving into the future. And those are things now that we can think about and bring to additional funders and be able to move forward as an organization. So I think there's a lot more to come. If anyone is maybe glanced at our strategic plan from 2020 to 2023, we have big goals. So in our last fiscal year, which ended at the end of July, we served over 200,000 crisis contacts via phone, chat, and text, which is more than we've ever done before. But our big goal is that by the end of our 25th year, which is the end of our fiscal year 2023, we'll be able to serve 1.8 million crisis contacts annually. So I don't know the math right off the top of my head. Someone else on this call probably does, but that's a pretty large percentage growth. But we're really confident about our ability to be able to do that in a sustainable way, and also in a way that really maintains and even improves our quality of care, because we have built the team, and also because we are building the foundation from a technology standpoint as well as from an organizational standpoint to achieve that growth. So I think lots of good things coming. And I do want to give a shout out to all of our Google Crisis counselors who are, actually talking to these young people. The last time we pulled this data, you all had served over 300 young people directly with crisis counseling, through some of those most challenging moments of young people's lives. You all had volunteered over 250 hours with us. So want to say thank you to you all. And, there's so much more to come.
Amazing. It has been really such an incredible collaboration, and we're so grateful to the Trevor Project for it. And you definitely have our support as you scale to meet the needs of all 1.8 million LGBTQ plus youth. I could definitely keep chatting all day and have more questions, but in the interest of time, I wanted to open it up to the audience questions now. Great. So to start, are there any plans to open source this technology for other crisis helplines to also use?
Yeah, I think that there are opportunities for us to share this technology beyond our own organization. And so, we've actually been having conversations with the .org team recently about how we might be able to, for example, kind of share what we've built with the crisis contact simulator. We know that that could be really helpful for other crisis organizations in training development. There also could be use cases outside of crisis that we haven't even really thought of yet. It could be even within the crisis space, beyond training, we've been thinking about perhaps like when COVID hit and there were a lot of young people reaching out about COVID in particular, or about the problems that were specific to going to school from home, that maybe we could create like a version of the crisis context simulator that is like specific to how to talk to young people in that particular situation. So again, could be opportunities for other crisis organizations or non-crisis organizations to leverage this kind of simulation technology. And so we're really open to having conversations about it, and is something that we're trying to think of right now.
I think John summed it up, but I think just generally we're very open to how we can leverage what we've learned and leverage our technology for other organizations across the space.
Any other audience questions? Great. Thank you so much for coming today. How do you see how technology evolving going forward in the organization?
That's a really good question. I think that, again, we're always kind of thinking through the lens of serving more young people with higher quality of care. And so I can't reveal too many of our plans yet, but we just did, our UX team led a cross-functional design vision sprint, which involved people across the technology department, as well as our crisis services team, and also involved actual counselors in trying to think about reimagining what the counseling experience could look like, and also what that youth experience could look like, and thinking about really intentional uses of AI. And so I think that there are a lot of things that we can probably do in the future. Right now, we're thinking about how do we kind of take this vision and convert it to action. And that's something that we'll be doing over the next couple of months. So I think over the next year to 2 years, we'll probably be kind of like building a whole new counseling experience that, again, allows us to serve more young people, but higher quality of care.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I think, from a crisis services standpoint, we're doing a lot of work in terms of how we are measuring and evaluating the efficacy of our program. So one thing that we know from a research study that was done is that over 90% of the young people that we serve, in a follow-up, they had sustained their de-escalation of their level of crisis even 4 weeks after the interaction. So what that means is basically that after young people spoke to us, they had a lower risk of suicide, and that was actually sustained over time. But we are also doing other kind of measurements of the quality of our services, how many young people would recommend us to one of their friends, how much they felt connected to our counselors. So this isn't as much kind of technology focused, but I think as we're continuing, as John said, to have that focus on growth as well as quality of care, we're also iterating on how we're actually measuring quality of care, and making sure that we're always thinking about things in the context of, broader mental health for LGBTQ youth. And actually, if anyone is interested, we do release we release a lot of research literally every single month, but every year we also release our annual LGBTQ youth mental health survey, which is the largest survey of its kind. Its first year we had 34,000 respondents, the second year we had 40,000 respondents. So anyone who on the line who's done surveys, that's a lot of people. But that research also really informs kind of where we head, not only with our technology, but also with all of our services. So for example, when we find that there are specific young people that are struggling of, for example, specific intersecting identities, we know we need to be reaching out to them with really culturally competent care, and make sure that we are prioritizing what we're seeing in the data from the survey, as well as other research that we do in our communities, and then applying that directly to our services.
Amazing. I think there's one more question. Let's see. How do you integrate an intersectional lens into your approach?
That's a really good question. I think, I'll take kind of our approach to like our bifurcation model. And this was, we also call it our risk assessment model, that kind of pre-assesses someone's risk of suicide. And so when we were kind of developing this model, the first thing that we wanted to do was make sure that there was a lot of different varieties of domain expertise that were involved in the creation of the model. So we partnered with our crisis services team, as well as our in-house research team. These are a ton of clinical expertise looking at it from different lenses. And we had a lot of conversations about making sure we're like asking the right questions, making sure that we are looking at fairness from the right angles. And this was an incredibly rewarding experience. We wouldn't have been able to create something as impactful as we did without their partnership. So when it came to things like fairness, we worked with both of those teams to look at different identities and intersectional identities that might be most susceptible to bias in a model. And we created a whole fairness evaluation framework where we could monitor how the model was engaging with these different identities and making sure that if there was anything that was different between one group and another, that we were able to address it effectively. And so we tried to look at this in everything we do, making sure that we're bringing in lots of different stakeholder groups. I think as we start doing even more work with like youth-facing features, we love the idea of like participatory design and actually involving real young people in the creation of the services that we're developing.
I think we had a couple of new questions come in. From Austin, thank you so much for your important work. Can you say more on how you're applying technology to the preventative space? It's a great question.
That's a great question. So I think, we're, in terms of prevention, I think that there's a couple of different things that we're working on. The one thing that comes up is advocacy. Another thing that comes up is TrevorSpace, our peer support social networking site for LGBTQ youth. I think that our team actually has already been using some of the technology developed for the risk assessment model and the crisis context simulator to help identify like areas that are still supportive of conversion therapy, helping to inform where we might kind of focus efforts in the future. I think that's still really preliminary, but already an area that we're thinking about kind of applying some of our learnings in a different area. And I'm also really excited to share that we just hired our first ever director of TrevorSpace, our peer support community. And we just got done with a very large foundational research study, a lot of ethnographic research, and where we actually brought in 20 young people of varying backgrounds to hear about kind of their life and how it intersects with technology in TrevorSpace. And we're just having our strategy sessions in the coming weeks about how we take this to the next phase. And we see TrevorSpace as a huge opportunity for prevention, because if young people can build a network and have supportive people in their lives, even if it's virtual, we know that like peer support and having an ally is something that helps prevent suicide. So we're going to also be looking at how we can invest in these areas too.
Yeah, John, I'll just add on there. I think you covered some really great stuff. at a high level, when we talk about our prevention programs, it definitely encompasses TrevorSpace, what John was just talking about, as well as our advocacy work, which is really about how are we helping implement policies on a national, state, local level that are good for LGBTQ youth. So one of our big initiatives there, as John was saying, is ending conversion therapy in the entire country. On a state, we've been doing it kind of state by state. Now we're doing it locally in a lot of different municipalities. And just for anyone who may not be familiar, conversion therapy is the very harmful and discredited practice of trying to turn an LGBTQ person into a non-LGBTQ person, which of course is not a real thing and leads to a lot of really horrible outcomes for young people, including increase in risk for anxiety, depression, suicidality. So being able to apply our technology to that prevention work is also really important. And just so people have kind of the full picture here of what falls under the prevention umbrella, we also do have that research program as well as our education program. So that is, how do we educate our communities on giving them the tools to best support LGBTQ youth, how to create inclusive environments, whether that's in workplaces, in homes, in schools, and how to, for example, spot the warning signs of suicide. So, I think technology really is the foundation for so much of what we do, because we are always looking at, when we're doing public training, how can we be implementing technology that will make that experience better and also more scalable to reach more folks with those tools. So I think that where we've implemented AI so far has been mostly in our crisis services, but I know we have some great work going on there in TrevorSpace, as well as John was sharing, and across the board. So thank you for that question. I'll just say, I think that our prevention programs are so important, and I think that people maybe know about them a little bit less because people know about kind of the crisis counseling services, but it really is complementary what we're able to do, and we want to make sure we're taking an innovative approach across the board.
Really great questions. I think we still have a few more. From Megan, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I'm curious to hear the biggest ways COVID-19 affected the Trevor community's needs and your approach.
I'm happy to start on this one, John. So COVID-19 impacted us a lot, also, of course, as individuals as well as an organization. A few things, and John, would love for you to elaborate more on what I'm about to say, but at the beginning of the pandemic, we had all of our digital crisis counselors were remote, so they could, do crisis counseling for anywhere. But for our phone lifeline, we had 2 call centers that had been, up and running since 1998, that had all the right security and technology to have a call center where we could pick up the phone and talk to young people. We were like, oh, we're not going to be able to have that anymore when we go remote. So there was really a Herculean effort to move the call center to being remote operations. And I think it happened in 2 weeks. So, John can definitely share a lot more about that process. But in addition, we just saw such a big impact of COVID-19 on the young people we serve. So, we had a huge increase in crisis contacts, in the pandemic, and more young people reaching out to us and needing support. We had a huge increase in usage on TrevorSpace globally, because young people were looking for a way to connect with one another. Young people were cut off from supportive community that they have. For example, many young people maybe were out living somewhere else. Maybe they were in college, maybe they found their community there, and then they're sent back to shelter in place with unsupportive family members. And we know that, unfortunately, a huge proportion of LGBTQ youth are living in households that are not LGBTQ affirming. And so that, of course, has such a big impact on young people's mental health. And in research that we did, we found that over 70% of LGBTQ youth said that their mental health was poor during the pandemic. And many young people kind of expressed a lot of concerns to us, both when they reached out to us, but also in our research, about not only unsupportive home situations, feeling unsafe in their homes, not having access to gender affirming care, lots of young people actually losing their jobs during the pandemic, and that impacting them as well from an economic insecurity standpoint. And of course, the young people that we serve have different aspects of their identity. And we also saw a large proportion of, for example, Black and Asian LGBTQ youth who reported facing discrimination based on their race or ethnicity over the last year. And we know from things like, minority stress, that these things do compound. So those are some of the ways that we have really recognized we need to be reaching out to more young people. We need to be continuing our growth. We want to make sure that we're reaching young people wherever they're at, because we see that there are these additional impacts that are detrimental to their mental health. But also just operationally, we're now a fully remote organization. We had to go totally remote with our actual call centers, but also all of our trainings. So I'll pass it to John to talk a little bit more maybe about the technology implications there.
Yeah, from a tech perspective, our lifeline was like, we're brick and mortar call centers in LA and New York for 20 years when the pandemic hit, and so we had to we had two waves of transitioning people remote. First of all, we view our services as 24 hours all the time. Like we can't like pause our lifeline for a couple of days to move people remote. We had to implement a couple of different processes. We first had to get a whole series of laptops for people to kind of take offsite for the lifeline, and then we actually had to kind of rebuild our entire environment. So we had to purchase and mail headsets to all of our volunteers, ones that filter ambient noise. They're not capturing dogs barking. We had to bring on staff to do technical checks because voice over IP is very sensitive to things like latency. And then we had to completely rebuild our security model so people could essentially take calls from offsite. And that ended up going really smoothly. It was a lot of work. It was successful. And it's really actually incredible because, in the past, when we're thinking about our lifeline, we actually just launched a whole new training program for our lifeline. We're now able to recruit volunteers from across the entire country. So, if you think about from like a diversity lens, there are, people, previously we're only able to recruit in West Hollywood and in Manhattan. And now we're able to bring in people from all across the country. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that has gone really well in going remote. And like I said at the beginning, there were some early investments we made in like buying laptops for everybody, and that made the transition for staff a lot easier. And but from a volume perspective, there's been a significant increase in volume, at times double our pre-COVID volume, and so it, like Shira was talking about, the impacts on young people has been really significant, and I'm really glad and proud of our team for making sure that we have been able to continue to support them 24 hours a day whenever they need us.
Yeah, it was a really heroic effort by the entire Trevor team that we got to witness, just to bring that all online. And I think just another really great example of one of those places where technology, it's not just about saving time or costs, but it really can improve the quality of care, since it enabled you all to have potentially a more diverse set of crisis counselors. So I think just a really cool example there.
Yeah, and I'm realizing now that transition happened in the middle of the fellowship. So there was a lot happening. I
think I saw another couple of questions come through. What would you recommend to all of the other crisis counseling organizations who face the same challenges as you did when scaling, but don't have an in-house tech team?
It's a really challenging question. And I actually had a conversation with a reporter about this, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and I basically said, the tech industry and the for-profit industry has moved at such a faster pace than nonprofits, and in particular crisis-serving nonprofits. And there's probably only a couple of crisis response organizations that have the technical capabilities that we do. And the reason that we have this is because for-profit tech companies have developed these philanthropic arms and have made technology, leading edge technology, previously only available to top paying for-profit customers, making that technology available to nonprofits, and also providing funding as well as skill-based volunteering and other things like that. So I think that there's a lot more that the tech space can do to support these really incredible mission-oriented organizations and crisis response organizations, I think that there's more that we can do in the future to share our learnings and findings with others. And I think hopefully that combination of both of those can lead to more innovation in this space. But a lot more innovation in this space is needed. And so it's a big call to action.
Yeah, I think that's so well said, John. And I'll just say as some advice that I would give any crisis organizations that are struggling with that challenge is knowing what they bring to the table and how valuable it can be to companies that they want to work with as well. So when John is talking about, this model that Google.org and the Trevor Project were able to do in terms of having funding as well as pro bono support as well as technological support, I think there's just a lot of education in the space to be done about why that kind of trifecta is so invaluable to nonprofits. So I think one piece of advice I would give is, figuring out what is needed, figuring out who are the external resources, whether it's consultants, whether it's pro bono volunteers that can help you, and then really be able to say, through working together on this, these are things that we'll be able to really accomplish. And there are, positive business impact for companies like Google who are able to engage in this type of work. So I would say really kind of being able to pursue impact in this way, and recognizing that these crisis organizations are saving lives and are doing such important work. And I will say, in terms of kind of the pro bono support in particular, I do think that having, technologists from different companies or from external groups devote significant time makes a very big difference in terms of being able to really push forward projects together.
The one other thing I just want to throw out there is, I don't know how many people know the statistic, but suicide's the second leading cause of death among all young people. That's frightening and disgusting and horrifying, and it's also a really high number for all people, adults as well. And so it's a big problem. It needs to be addressed. We need more resources, and so it's important to to support a lot of these organizations and the work that they're doing.
Wait, I'll add one other thing to there, because if anyone is not familiar with the work that is happening right now called 988, which is the implementation of a national suicide prevention number that when you're in crisis, you're having a mental health crisis, you can call 988 and get connected with a crisis organization such as the Trevor Project. So that is something that is supposed to be launching in 2022. And the Trevor Project has been working really, really closely with both the government as well as different nonprofits on that work. It actually, the bill that was required to start to establish 988 passed unanimously last year. And a really amazing fact is that it was the first bill to pass unanimously that specifically called out specialized services for LGBTQ youth. So that's huge, but it shows that, as John said, there is so much more needed from a resourcing standpoint, including technology, but also more broadly for these crisis organizations. But the good news is that there's actually been some really amazing developments and a recognition that this is very important. Crisis intervention, suicide prevention, mental health are extremely important, and that we as a society across all sectors, government, corporations, nonprofits, all need to be working together to move that forward.
I will use that opportunity to give one more plug for the blue donate button. If you feel so inspired to support the Trevor Project's truly life-saving work, there really is, the need is just so great, and so any support is helpful. I think we have another question. Love John's artwork, me as well. Sorry if I missed it, but was there anything you wanted to do that you could not get done in time or that didn't work the way you wanted it to? Is there more to be done with AI?
Sure thing. So cool plug for the painting. It was made by an artist named Gary Baseman. And I think Gary sketched the outline, and then it's made up of thousands of fingerprints from prides. And so this was donated to the Trevor Project, and it was sold off in a silent auction. The people who own the painting did not have a truck to transport it, and so they graciously are letting me borrow it for a background in video conference calls, which is really great. Don't tell them that they do want it back. I think that there's certainly a lot that we're looking at in the AI space. We're looking at it in quality improvement, assessing how conversations went between young people and our counselors. We're looking at it for kind of applications during the actual conversation with young people. So, one thing that we might be able to do is actually extract important details about the conversation to keep those points kind of front and center for the counselor, so they're addressing those presenting issues. We think that there's a really big opportunity to provide resourcing recommendations to the counselor to then provide to the young person. Again, people reach out to us for so many different reasons, and resources are a really important part of our clinical model. So, and then there's other things that we're looking at as well. We're currently looking at some kind of conversation summarization and other things that can be leveraged both in kind of quality improvement as well as in scalability. So lots of exciting things, and we're continuing to kind of innovate on our crisis context simulator, and also looking at how we can use a similar kind of model that we built for the risk assessment tool in our peer support community, TrevorSpace. So potentially flagging content expressing suicidal intent or crisis, so our 24-hour team can provide resources to young people if needed. So lots of applications.
Yeah, the last thing that I'll share, which is not directly in response to this question, but John just reminded me of this fact. I mean, we've been implementing a lot of this technology not only for our crisis services, which is US-based, but also for TrevorSpace, which is global. But if you look at our current strategic plan, we also have ambitions to go have language and or global expansion or international expansion. So we're currently in the process of scoping out what that will look like. And certainly there will be a lot of applications for technology as we expand to potential new languages or countries. We now have someone who has recently joined our team who's amazing, who is really leading that work and scoping out what that will look like. So I know there are folks from different locations that might be watching this, so just know, I mean, TrevorSpace is a resource that is currently available for LGBTQ youth anywhere across the world, and we have folks from so many countries who are on there. But in addition, we're continuing to grow our global impact, and there's no doubt that we will need a lot of technology to do so, and I think probably varies kind of based on where you are as well.
Well, I think those are unfortunately all of the questions that we have time for today. But I just wanted to say thank you again to all of our viewers for tuning in and for all of the really, really great questions. And also a huge thank you to Shira and John for all of the incredible work that you both do each and every day at the Trevor Project, and also for your time today. Always really great to see you both. So thank you so much for chatting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen, and thanks everybody at Google for having us. Thank you all.